Welcome to Season 5, Episode 3 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm going to be talking about 4 ways time management habits get derailed and how you can get back on track. Visit truthforteachers.com to get the written highlights and to share your thoughts on the show. This podcast episode is sponsored by theteachertoolkit.com, a free website with over 60 teaching tools designed to help make your instruction engaging and meaningful. For each strategy, you'll find step-by-step instructions, editable templates, and even video footage from real classrooms to show you the strategy in action. To check out these free tools and the growing collection of affordable online courses, visit theteachertoolkit.com. So this season on the podcast, I'm going to be doing a new feature every couple of episodes, which is a coaching call. So this is basically instructional coaching and life coaching kind of all blended together, where I'm answering teachers specific questions about productivity and balance and just sort of managing it all. Each of the teachers that I'll be coaching are graduates of the 40-Hour Teacher Workweek Club. So they've completed their year in the club and they have a lot of insight already as to how to be intentional about their time, how to develop a strong positive mindset, but they're still wanting to streamline because these issues really are lifelong challenges. Balance is something that you have to continually work toward every day as new demands on your time crop up. So today, I'm going to be doing a coaching call with a grade 4 teacher in Alberta, Canada. Her name is Kendall. Kendall has given me permission to record our conversation and share it here with you on the podcast. So if these are issues that you're facing, you can learn too. Listen in as Kendall and I talk. You have 4 questions specifically that you wanted to talk about today. And the first is your system for managing papers that come into your classroom. So can you tell me a little bit about what you did so far and where you're running into trouble?
Yeah, absolutely. This has drastically improved my life, what you set out. So I have a basket for extra papers at the front of my classroom. I have a whole bin system at the front of my classroom for papers to be handed in throughout the day, as well as one for each day of the week, and then one for kind of ongoing math stuff and ongoing LA stuff, and then other ongoing or upcoming papers to put in there. So as far as papers that I've prepped and that kind of stuff, that's all organized. And then I have my inbox, which is for students to put things in, any forms or anything like that, as well as notes to me or whatever comes, because they're grade 4s and they like to draw me pictures, which is lovely. Mm-hmm. And then also in there, if I'm trying to keep the clutter off of my desk, so if I don't have time to put something somewhere right away, that's where it goes as well. And that's just at the edge of my desk. And then behind my desk, I have a little filing system that has the to do immediately, to do as soon as possible, and then to keep on hand papers. So that's the system I have. I guess my problem primarily is when things come into my inbox basket, that can get really full with not moving things to the to do immediately or to do as soon as possible if I'm not doing that regularly throughout the day. Or I find that my to do immediately and to do as soon as possible can stack up. I guess because I just don't have a good system as to when to get those things done.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you've done a really good job of making sure you have one place for every type of paper. So that's really good. That's sort of the foundational thing, is that you don't have these random papers where you're not sure where they go. But it sounds like really the issue is that the inbox is sort of piling up. And I love the inbox. I'm really glad that you're using that. I think it's important to have that sort of catch-all place at first and a place for students to put things for you. But it only works if you are emptying it really daily, or at least every other day. It might not happen every day, but that's sort of the goal. And I think the way to keep it from piling up is to get rid of stuff right away, before you even put it in there. So if you go down, you check your mailbox, you've got papers, copy the information down onto your calendar, into your lesson plans, whatever you need, and then get rid of it. So I think a lot of times we put that off thinking it's going to take longer than it does. But if it's something that's going to take you 30 seconds or less, just do it. And then you can get rid of the paper.
Fair enough.
and then it sounds like you've got good holding places for other information. So, for example, if you're collecting field trip forms or something, rather than letting that sit in your inbox until you have the whole class's stuff, make sure you're putting it into that designated slot or that basket right away. So when those come into your inbox, it just takes a few seconds, move it right out to that specific holding place. That way you can find what you're looking for and have all the same types of papers together.
Okay.
Now, in terms of like the inbox itself, it sounds like you may need like a regular time when you're emptying it. And that's something that I do really with my email is digital organization and digital thing that's a whole nother issue. But that's something that has been really helpful for me personally is to have set times in my schedule where that is my job, is to empty the inbox, empty both for email and like a physical inbox if I have actual papers to deal with. So maybe that could be something that you could work into your day. It's just something that you do each morning or each afternoon or every other afternoon as you go through those papers. And it's just designated time for that task. So that's one issue, is thinking about the papers. Tell me about your next question.
So I often, this is something I've discussed with my husband regularly, because I talk about getting stuck, and I get stuck in a lot of areas of my life. And specifically as far as teaching, I get stuck searching for resources. And even when I set time limits for myself, I find that I'm not happy with what I found, and then I'll keep looking, or I'll get to the end of my time limit and nothing that I found really works. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of keep going, and or I'll kind of get to the end of, what should have been a half an hour session and now has extended to 2 hours, and I kind of give up on searching and go, okay, well, I guess I'll make it. And, and then compound an additional half an hour to make the resource or whatever on my own. And then I've wasted an excessive amount of time that I really didn't need to be wasted. So what do you do when you get to the end of your time limit and you haven't found what you need, but the time is up?
Mm-hmm. So here you're following the advice from the club about not allowing yourself to accidentally spend an entire evening looking for ideas on Pinterest or wherever. You've decided in advance how much time you're going to allot, and that's what you do. But the problem is that when time is up, you haven't always found what you need. And so you want to keep looking. Is that right?
Yeah.
So to me, this seems like it's partially about relaxing your standards. So relaxing your standards to a level where no one else is going to notice but you. Mm. So the kids don't know what this perfect lesson that you had dreamed up in your head. The ideal lesson is something that only you know exists. So if you have something else that is meaningful or engaging, then you can just go with that. So if you're noticing that you're getting close to the end of your time, you haven't found anything yet, maybe stop a little bit sooner. So maybe when you have 5, 10, 15 minutes left in your search time, say, okay, I'm getting to the end here. I haven't found exactly what I need. Let me use the remainder of my time now to make a decision. So I've got option A, I've got option B, I've got option C. None of them is exactly what I wanted, but I'm out of time. So let me pick something and just go with it. I think part of this comes from really just being an excellent teacher. Like I could tell that from talking to you. You are innovative, you're creative, you want to have the best stuff for your kids. And you know that the better the lesson is, the easier it's going to be to teach it. Because when you have a really engaging lesson, it's so much less work for you. It's so much less energy expended because the kids are with it and you want to do the best for them. So I totally get that. But not every lesson has to be a slam dunk on paper. You don't have to try to make something perfect before you use it with your kids, because a lot of times you're not going to even know exactly what they need until you start teaching it. So my advice really is to practice improvising on the spot in response to what kids need, rather than try to plan and prepare for everything. So I call this sometimes like planned winging it. Like you know you're going to be winging it, and you've prepared yourself for that. Because a lot of times the best lesson ideas come to us right in the middle of teaching, right? You realize something that you were going to do, it was just going to be a regular activity, you didn't have anything special planned. And in the middle of it, you realize, I can gamify this. Or the kids give you an idea, or they say something and you're like, oh, I'm running with this. We're going to do it this way instead. The kids will inspire you to be creative on the spot. So if you are a naturally innovative, creative teacher like you are, you don't have to know everything beforehand. And the longer that you teach your same grade level and the same subject area, the more comfortable you'll get with this, and the more you'll be able to trust your own expertise and know, okay, this wasn't exactly the way I wanted it this morning, but when I get in there, I'm going to feed off the kids' energy, I'm going to follow their cues, and we're going to develop this lesson sort of together as we go. And that can often be the best lesson that you can come up with.
Very true.
So tell me about what your next question is.
I love the idea of planning more than 1 week at a time. That's really exciting to me, but I also find it really overwhelming. Right now, I typically plan for the following week on Friday at the end of the day or on Sunday, which I don't love using my Sundays, but it's become habit and routine, sadly. And I want to plan more than 1 week out, but I feel like either when I get to that point in my teaching, I forget what I've planned because I planned it a while ago, or so much has changed because of interruptions or, changes to the schedule, or suddenly we had a lockdown and everything's been moved and pushed, or, kids just took twice the time to do what I thought was going to take one class. So how do I effectively plan in advance?
So planning in advance means a lot of times just knowing what topics or skills that you're going to be covering each day. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have every minute already mapped out. So just the main skills that you're going to hit, the general plan that you have for helping kids work toward mastery. In my opinion, that's something that should stay largely the same, regardless of what else happens in the day. Because if you're going to stay on track with your pacing guide or your curriculum map, then it doesn't really matter what happens tomorrow. You still need to be hitting the same skills next week. Does that make sense? Do you have a pacing guide or a curriculum map that you're required to follow?
No, we create our own at the beginning of the year, and we use ours as quite a flexible idea of about where we should be. So it's nice that we're not stuck to something really, really strict. And we don't have any end of year testing in our district at the end of the year that we have to push for, which is nice.
That's awesome. Okay, so you don't have to be quite as strict with this than a teacher who knows, okay, our test is on March 20th, and by that time we need to have covered X, Y, and Z. So that's good that you can be a little bit more flexible. And I see also how that's more challenging for you because you do have that flexibility. So I think, knowing about where you want to be is probably good enough. And you may actually want to do a little bit less planning in advance that way. So know the general plan of what you want to do. So you're going to hit, X standard by doing X activity, and you're going to have X assessment. And having that sort of thing planned out for a whole unit at a time will let you see the big picture. So you can see where you need to get your students and then work backwards. So it's sort of just a rough outline. And then when the week arrives, then you can look at the assemblies and the schedule changes and, where your kids are at. Maybe you're a little further behind than you thought you would be. That's when you can determine the exact activities you'll do. So you look and see, okay, I was thinking, when I teach this skill, I usually like to do this particular activity with it. But it looks like I'm not going to have quite as much time. So how can I shorten that? Or maybe I can pick this other thing instead. And one more thing that I would add here is to make sure that you're building in buffer time as well. So don't plan too much or overschedule. If you know that you're going to have interruptions, and really what teacher doesn't have interruptions, right? Then plan for them. We don't know exactly what interruption it is, but we can just plan in general. There are going to be things that I didn't expect to happen today. So plan less. Instead of having students, in your lesson plan say, okay, we're going to go over these 10 problems or we're going to do these 3 things, just plan to go over 5 problems. And then if you have the extra time, you can do more. So this is sort of the opposite of how a lot of teachers plan, which is with the optimal scenario in mind. We think of like the best case scenario. I want to be able to get through these 10 problems. So that's what I'm going to plan. And then it doesn't happen and we get frustrated and we feel behind. So don't do that for yourself. But, don't plan according to the optimal scenario. Plan for a realistic scenario. Plan less and then you can add in more if you have time for it.
Okay.
So we have time for one more question. Is there one more thing you wanted to know?
Absolutely. Some days I feel completely exhausted at the end of the teaching day, but I feel like I have this need to push through my exhaustion and just try and get some work done. And obviously I'm not very effective in that time because I'm exhausted, but I have a really hard time letting myself go home early and saying that that's okay. how can I help myself recognize unproductive days versus like, I'm just being lazy and I just have to push through this because I will be able to be productive, versus the days where truly I'm just not productive and I just need to let go of that. And then what do I do with the things on my list?
Mm-hmm. I love that question. You have such great questions, Kendall. These are so thoughtful. So I think first off, if this is regularly a problem for you, if you have all this stuff to do at the end of the day and you're too exhausted to do it, then start by maybe creating a different schedule for yourself if that's possible. I'm the same way as you. Like the hours of like 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., they are my worst. They're my least productive. It's awful for me to try to get anything done. Then I'm just brain dead and physically exhausted. So I try to get up earlier and work. Or give myself that break in the afternoon and then try to come back in to that task in the evening. Sometimes I'll get this burst of energy in the evenings and, I could do a couple more things, particularly if they aren't that mentally draining. So I try to do the stuff that requires the most concentration earlier in the day and then some of the more mindless stuff, email and that kind of thing, in the afternoon. I'm wondering if changing up your schedule at all is possible so that you don't have to work on the really intense tasks right after school.
Yeah, definitely. Our school starts relatively early. We have staff devotions 4 times a week before school starts. So I find it challenging to do stuff in the morning typically because it's kind of short chunks of time broken up, which is a challenge. And then I've trained myself, and this is something I certainly can change, but when I leave the school, I'm done work and I just go home and I'm done, except for on Sundays when I get some prep done. But you're right. It might be better to go home and relax for a bit and then get some work done later on in the evenings.
You could, or if you find that balance is working well, that when you leave, you're done, then maybe it's something where either you save more of those tasks for Sunday and then you leave a little earlier during the week, or maybe you can work on some of these things, during planning time or something else. Scheduling is just sort of one piece. I understand when you have an early school day like that, it's not always possible to do things early. I think maybe the other thing here is, you're asking about sort of when to force yourself to be self-disciplined and push through and when to cut yourself some slack. And I think you're on the right track when you're talking about recognizing these unproductive days and times and not trying to force yourself to perform optimally anyway when you know that it's just not in you. Sometimes just completely shutting off work and not thinking about it at all for the rest of the evening or the rest of the night will give you more focus and more concentration the next day. And I think that's especially true when you do something completely different and you give yourself a true mental break. So you get some exercise, you play outside with the kids, you watch a movie, anything besides sitting down and concentrating, basically. So I think you can give yourself breaks like that when you know that it's going to be pointless to push through. And the more that you are aware of this, the more you'll learn for yourself. Like you'll start to recognize, okay, it's just not happening today. It's just not going to happen. And you'll learn how to regulate yourself, and you'll know when you can push through and when you can't. And I think the more that you batch your work and you get ahead, the more freedom you have to do that, because you can't wait another day when the tasks that you have to do have to be done for tomorrow. But if you're a couple days ahead, then you do have some flexibility. So take that break when you can, and then the next day, really set yourself up for success. Be well rested, eat something healthy. Don't let yourself get bogged down in, social media or watching politics or whatever it is that drains your energy. Know what drains your mental and your emotional and your spiritual energy, and avoid those things on that day so that you can be at your peak performance and be, at your peak productivity. So at the end of the day, if okay, I'm just not going to get through this stuff, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to cross everything off my list. That way you have an empty to-do list at the end of every day. Move those tasks to the next day or to later in the week, some other time. So they are going to get done. They're scheduled in there, but they're not still sort of hanging over your head for that day. And then, like I said, make sure that you are set up for success the next day. The next day, you're going to have a little bit more on your plate. Try not to pile too many extra things on there. If you think of things during the day that need to be done, don't try to cram that in too, because you've already got a full day. Put it off to the next day. That kind of intentional procrastination is just fine. And then really set yourself up. This is my productivity day. I'm going to only do things that give me energy and that help me focus. And I'm going to really try to make the most of that particular day.
That makes sense. As you were speaking, something that stuck out to me was a mindset shift from, I'm giving myself this, the slack, or I should be productive, even though I'm tired, to shifting it to, if I intentionally choose to give myself a break today and take rest, I'm going to be able to be more productive tomorrow, rather than trying to push through and being unproductive anyways, and then still tired tomorrow because I've drained myself. So I think that's a good perspective shift for me.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because, I think sometimes we feel like we should function like machines, like we should just function optimally all the time. And, it only takes getting in one traffic jam or having one argument with someone or one, nasty parent phone call that can just completely throw off your energy and your focus and your concentration. And, we're human beings. We have emotions and we have ups and downs, and we have different times of the day, of the week, of the month, of the year that we have more energy and focus, and then times and seasons of our lives when we have less. And I think the more that we try to work with that, instead of trying to force ourselves to always be productive, the better results we get. And I think the really cool thing is once you start paying more attention to that for yourself, you start to notice the same thing for the kids too. Because we push kids to sit and focus and concentrate and give 100%. Who can give 100% energy for 7 hours straight? Nobody can do that. I can't do that as an adult. How do we expect these little kids to do it, right? They're going to have days when they are distracted, when they're just not at their best. And I think once we start to see that in ourselves, then we can see that in our students, and then we can sort of give them that same grace too, which just makes for a much less stressful life for everyone, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that's about all the time we have for today, Kendall, but I would love to wrap up by finding out what your sort of takeaway truth is. What's the principle that stood out to you the most in our conversation that you want to try to take action on right away?
Oh boy, there's a few good things that I wrote down. I think probably that last one, honestly, of a mindset shift from having to push myself through to be productive to recognizing that when I intentionally choose to take some time, when I am tired and I'm not productive, take that time to do something restorative, I will be more productive tomorrow, and to release myself from that. I think that'll be really big for me.
Yep, that's a great takeaway. Sometimes it's not even the things that we do, it's just those mindset shifts that make the big difference, totally. Right?
That's been what I've been learning more than anything through the club is those small mindset shifts that just allow me to be more productive, or allow me to release myself from a lot of my perfectionism that really plagues me.
Yep. Well, you're doing great, Kendall. I'm so proud of all the systems you've created for yourself, the progress you're making, and just the really awesome things that you're doing with your kids. I mean, your students are so fortunate to have you, and it's just wonderful to hear your passion and your enthusiasm. And I'm really glad that you shared everything that you did with us today.
Thank you so much.
So a big thanks to Kendall for talking with me, and a big thanks to all of you for listening. Have a fantastic week. And remember, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it. Truth for Teachers is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more great podcast recommendations, go to edupodcastnetwork.com. That's edupodcastnetwork.com.